What is up, everybody? I'm Courtney, and as you all can see, I am unfortunately missing my co-host tonight. Sean is a little bit under the weather, so if everybody can please lift him up in your prayers for continued healing, that would be great. He had a surgery on yesterday, and he's resting up as we speak. But that is okay. You're stuck with me. Leah, hi, and the pink hands. James Brady, Spirit Led Paranormal, thanks for jumping in. Paul, North Carolina Coastal Plains. Thank you, James. I appreciate that. Mama D. Hey, Ma. Your son's in there resting. Currently, his daughter is his caregiver while you guys are stuck staring at me for an hour. Daryl, all the way from the beach. Thanks for thinking about Sean. I appreciate that. Bedford Paranormal, Spirit of Clover Hill, and the Appomattox Historical County Jail. If you guys have not been to Daryl's locations that he hosts, 10 out of 10 must go. Thank you, Becky, his other half. We appreciate your prayers. Paul, thank you. There he is. He hopped in. Yes, Sean is here in spirit. Y'all just can't see him. Here he is. Tell Miss Kim I said hello. Michael Brooks from Fredericksburg Paranormal. Thanks for jumping in. Thank you, Leah. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. But he is, Mama D. He is. Thank you. Guys, on this show, I don't normally put out disclaimers, but I am going to put out a disclaimer for this particular show. There can and will be some sensitive content that I'm discussing tonight. So if there's any little ears or people that get grossed out, might not be the show for you. I'm sure you guys all saw tonight. We're kind of taking a turn and we're going to be talking about serial killers. Ronnie Anderson, Bedford Paranormal. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. My inbox for some reason is blowing up because beloved Ozzy Osbourne has passed away today. So he was 76 and he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and it got the best of him today. So I will say, I've said this 1,000 trillion times, heaven has one hell of a concert going on up there. So yes. Yes, Paul. So without further ado, guys, like I said, I'm kind of going to talk a little bit tonight about the psychology behind serial killers, some unusual serial killer facts. I'm going to give you some personalized statistics from Virginia, as well as a few lesser known serial killers. Everybody's heard about Ted Bundy. Everybody's heard about Dahmer, Gacy, Ed Gein, all the popular ones that, you know, were made popular mainly by media and Hollywood. But I want to go kind of on the lesser known realm. When we were in Savannah, Sean picked himself up a piece of serial killer history. He acquired an actual letter written by Eileen Wuornos to her childhood friend, Dawn. Yes, it is original. Yes, it has been authenticated. We have put it in a glass case. It is behind plastic, and it is definitely a piece of serial killer history. I know you are, Ronnie. I know. Yeah, Leah, it's all over social media. He was definitely one of a kind, James, for sure. Yes, the Muffin Man was a serial killer. Hey, Emily, shout out Lost Souls PI. It is sad, Leah. But the psychology of serial killers is a little bit complex, guys. It involves a wide mixture of childhood trauma, personality disorders, biological factors that drive this violent behavior. Some key psychological factors here are childhood trauma. A lot of serial killers have experience significant trauma during like their most formative years: abuse, neglect, abandonment, sexual abuse, or I'm sorry, I guess for YouTube, I have to say SA. This early trauma leads to a lot of emotional disturbances. A lack of empathy is often seen in most serial killers. For example, individuals like Ted Bundy, David Berkowitz, they had extremely troubled childhoods that directly contributed to their violent tendencies. Serial killers often exhibit traits associated with personality disorders, particularly antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy. These individuals typically lack, like I said, empathy. They're manipulative. A lot of them have superficial charm. It allows them to blend into society while committing their heinous acts. They have an extreme desire for control and power. Many serial killers are driven by a need for control and power over their victims. Some have neurological factors. Research has indicated that abnormalities in the brain structure itself and the function, particularly like the prefrontal cortex, contribute to a lot of the violent behavior. These brain regions are involved in processing emotion and regulating aggression. So serial killers may have reduced connectivity between these areas, leading to diminished emotional response and increased impulsivity. Many serial killers experience social isolation, which will exacerbate any feeling of like alienation, lead to violent fantasies, and prevent them from forming any sort of healthy relationship, which also fuels further violent tendencies. So in conclusion, understanding the psychology behind serial killers takes a lot of examination of biological, psychological, and social factors. Their behaviors are often rooted in complex emotional and psychological issues that start from early on. So that's kind of a brief synopsis of some of the psychology behind serial killers. Paul said, LOL, Muffin Man. Yes, Emily is in the house. There were some interesting serial killer facts that I was able to dig up. A lot of them are repetitive, so I'm going to kind of skim through. But a serial killer, in order to be dubbed a serial killer, you have to have murdered 3 or more people over a specific period of more than a month, and then have a cool-off period in between murders. I thought that fact was like super specific because, like, okay, you can kill people over the course of a month. As long as you have a cool-off period in between, you're considered a serial killer. The motive is also usually based on psychological, often sexual gratification through the motive, and must include anger, thrill, money, or attention seeking. You have to have all of those characteristics in order to be dubbed a serial killer. According to the FBI, more than 70% of serial killers experience problems related to substance abuse, but only a few of them were actually addicted to alcohol. Many of them just dabbled in substance abuse in their youth. Most serial killers, like I said before, experience sexually stressful events in their childhood. Dr. Harold Shipman, okay, he is regarded as the most prolific serial killer in modern history. He has over 250 murders ascribed to him. He was a British doctor who murdered his patients. The oldest was a 93-year-old woman, and the youngest was a 41-year-old man. So he had no gender specification, and he ended up hanging himself in his cell in 2004, 24 hours before he turned 58 years old. America's very first serial killer is considered to be Dr. H.H. Holmes. He confessed to 27 murders in the late 1890s. He claimed that he could not help the fact that he was a murderer no more than the poet can help the inspiration to sing. That is a direct H.H. Holmes quote. Almost all serial killers admit that they started by acting out their fantasies on small animals before they moved to humans. and that animal torture brought them a great source of pleasure. Given that most serial killers are from dysfunctional families, such pathological and abnormal behavior may be ignored. Jeffrey Dahmer's father, for example, had absolutely no qualms that his son performed animal dissections. He had no idea. So FBI Special Agent Robin, I'm giving Robin a whole nother name. Robert Ressler is the man who actually coined the term serial killer, and that was coined in 1971. Serial murderers are frequently found to have an unusual or unnatural relationship with their mothers. Again, psychological fun fact, right? And then while many serial killers were abused or beaten as children, there were some exceptions. Jeffrey Dahmer being the most, apparently had the most normal upbringing, but he ended up being one of the most horrible sex murderers in pop culture. His father actually wrote a book, A Father's Story, which searches for explanations for his son's deviance. Sean, if you're listening, can you come get this dog out of this office, please? James said I could never be a serial killer. I don't have the patience to wait months at a time. There has to be a cool-off period, James. There has to be. All right, let's keep going with the fun facts. There are 6 phases of a serial killer cycle, okay? 1 is the aura phase. That's where the serial killer begins losing a grip on reality. He's kind of in his own thoughts, making up scenarios in his head. 2, the trolling phase. That's when the killer searches for his victim. All right. 3 is the wooing phase. That's where the killer lures his victim. 4 is the capture phase, where the victim is actually entrapped. 5, the murder or totem phase, which is the emotional high for the killer. And finally, they go into the final phase, which is 6, the depression phase, which occurs after the killing. Most serial killers actually fall into a depression after they've killed their victim, not because of remorse or anything like that, but because the actual act of killing is over. Very few serial killers turn themselves in. Ed Kemper is one notably. He called the police to confess from a telephone booth and sat at the booth and waited to be picked up. So he was ready to turn himself in. 86% of serial killers are heterosexual, but the very small percentage that were homosexual ended up to be horrific monsters. John Wayne Gacy is one. Jeffrey Dahmer is one. Psychiatrists note that psychopaths cannot be successfully treated. There is no cure for a psychopath. 70% of serial killers received extensive head injuries as children. And in 20th century America, the serial killer has become to embody a host of anxiety about runaway crime, sexual violence, breakdown of civil conduct, etc. While many children wet the bed, bedwetting is actually a huge behavior that is a sign of deeper pathology when it persists beyond the age of 12. Over 60% of serial killers wet the bed beyond the age of 12. The 3 warning signs of future psychopathic behavior are, like I said, prolonged bedwetting, animal torture, and juvenile pyromania. Criminologists call these symptoms the triad. Most serial killers in the U.S. are Caucasian, with a whopping 84%. Approximately 16% are African American. Men constitute the overwhelming preponderance of serial killers. Over 90% of serial killers are men. So guys, you're out here just wilding out. Let's see. Hey, Lois, thanks for stopping by. CVPS, Central Virginia Paranormal Society. Mrs. Cushman, hello, hello. I don't see John Sullivan's comment, but Lois said hi, so I'm going to say hi too. John Sullivan, Fredericksburg Paranormal. Leah, they did not ever find out who the Zodiac Killer was. Ronnie, it is said that the everyday person will cross paths with up to 30 plus serial killers in a lifetime. When I tell you the statistics, and I'll pick the surrounding states because I know we have several people from North Carolina in here. So I'll also include the statistics from North Carolina as well. Let's see, only 15% of serial murder cases are chosen at random. So not a lot of them are targeted. Historians note that legends such as werewolves and vampires were inspired by medieval serial killers. There was actually a board game that was created back in the day called Serial Killer. It created a controversy when it was put on the market. I want to say it was a few years ago. But basically, the winner of the game was the person who had the highest body count at the end. The game came packaged in a plastic body bag. It created such a stir that they pulled it off the shelves. I would have liked to have played that game for sure. There is a whole genre of music surrounding serial killers. It's called murder metal. A Chicago band named, and I could be saying this wrong, Macabre. So if I'm saying that wrong, let me know, musicians in the room. Their entire catalog of songs are devoted to serial killers. And that started the trend murder metal. The U.S. state with the most psychopaths is Connecticut. Following Connecticut, close behind is California, New Jersey, New York, and Wyoming. And New York and Wyoming are tied. Many serial killers are fascinated by authority, actually. They have attempted to become police officers, security guards. They've served in the military. Many have also disguised themselves as law enforcement to gain access to victims, such as Ted Bundy, the Hillside Stranglers, and John Gacy. So those are some kind of unusual, I don't want to call them fun facts about serial killers, but facts. We'll leave it at that. Did they find the Zodiac Killer? I thought they never found him. Sean corrected me, guys. See, even from being recovering, he's still picking with me. Son of Sam is another one. You are correct. And they made a movie about Son of Sam. I want the serial killer game too. I wonder if it's available like on one of those sites, like not Amazon, but one of those like third party, like Etsy or something. All right. So some serial killer statistics for you guys. The FBI estimates that there are approximately 25 to 50 active serial killers in the U.S. at any given time. From 1980 to 2008, the U.S. experienced 3,000 known serial killings. That's a lot. The majority of identified serial killers, like I said, are male. That makes up 90% of the cases. Serial killings are more prevalent in urban areas. Certain regions, such as the Midwest, have historically reported higher rates of serial killings. But the number of serial killings peaked in the 80s and the 90s, and a decline was observed in the 2000s. I wonder what that's from. Advances in forensic technology and law enforcement practices is what it's from. This is said to contribute to the decline in serial killings. Let's see. Accurate statistics can be difficult to obtain due to like underreporting, varying definitions of what constitutes a serial killing, etc. But the ones that I'm about to hit you with came directly from the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Program, and that provides some of the most reliable data out there. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in it. The state of Virginia, from 1992 to 2019, had 272 victims of serial killers. I told you I would do North Carolina. Okay. They had 295 victims of serial killers. All right. With the most popular known serial killer in North Carolina as Henry Louis Wallace, also known as the Taco Bell Strangler. He killed a total of 11 people, and he is still on death row. In Virginia, and I'm going to hop on over to him, the best known serial killer out of the state of Virginia is Alfredo Rolando Prieto. The killer's victim total is 9, and he was executed. So if you want to know another state, let me know. James, the game is called Serial Killer. No, Ronnie, Garth Brooks is not a serial killer. Chris Gaines. But moving on to Mr. Alfredo Prieto. Alfredo Rolando Prieto committed his crimes here, okay? He is a Salvadorian American serial killer. After being initially convicted for a single murder, he was later connected to 8 other murders committed in Virginia and California between May of 1988 and September of 1990. They caught him via DNA profiling. He was sentenced to death in both Virginia and California, and he was executed by lethal injection here in Virginia in 2015. He was one of 6 children. He spent his childhood and adolescence in poverty. Again, his parents experienced heavy financial difficulties during the football war in El Salvador. His mother left El Salvador in 1975 due to her husband's abuse. She immigrated to the United States during the outbreak of the Salvadorian Civil War. He witnessed many civilians being killed, including his own grandfather, and he would subsequently be diagnosed with PTSD. In 1981, his mother retrieved her children. I'm sorry, so I was wrong. She retrieved her children from El Salvador. I don't know if I said that. She then at that point resided in Pomona, California. During high school, he became addicted to drugs and alcohol. Around this time, he and his brother met Sandra Figueroa, whose brothers were members of a local street gang named the 456 Island Piru. Prieto then joined the gang, dropped out of school, and married Sandra. The couple had a child in 1984. And in August of 1984, Prieto shot 3 people in Ontario, claiming his wife had cheated on him with one of the wounded men. His wife later said that Prieto subjected her to SA and aggression, which he 100% denied till the end. In late 1984, he was found guilty of the shootings, but since the victims were rival gang members, the court actually showed leniency to him. He received a very short prison sentence and was released in 1987, after which time he decided, you know what, California isn't for me, and he packed it on up and moved it to our beautiful state of Virginia. He settled up north in Arlington County, where his father had immigrated after serving a murder conviction in El Salvador. And once in Arlington, he found a job. He met another woman who later then at that point bore him a son. In 1989, his father was arrested and jailed for raping a woman. He then left the state, went back to California. And in the early morning of September 2nd, 1990, along with 29-year-old Vincent Lopez and 33-year-old Danny Sorian, they robbed Anthony Rangella in Ontario. They then took him hostage, drove to his house where he lived with his 33-year-old aunt Emily, her 17-year-old daughter Lisa, and her friend Yvette, a 15-year-old. They kidnapped the women, drove to the outskirts of the city, but along the way, Lopez refused to participate any further and actually jumped out of the car. He was replaced by another friend of Prieto's, Ricardo Estrada, whom they came across while buying gas at a gas station. Together, they essayed the women in an abandoned building in an industrial zone on the eastern outskirts of the city, shot and killed the 15-year-old, while Sorian and Estrada stabbed Emily and Lisa, and then they fled the scene. Despite severe injuries and extensive blood loss, though, Emily and Lisa survived, and they managed to call the police. They were taken to the hospital where they testified about the attack. And on that same day, they found the 15-year-old's body and the car which the criminals had used. Prieto and his accomplices were discovered after street informants learned about the crime and contacted authorities. Police then swept in, arrested Prieto, everybody else involved. A pistol belonging to one of the victims was found at his apartment, determined to be the murder weapon, and he was at that point charged with first-degree murder, rape, kidnapping, and robbery. He was found guilty January 21st, 1992 on every charge and sentenced to death. 12 days later, he was transferred to San Quentin, where he would spend the next 14 years awaiting execution on death row. At that point, they ran DNA and found out he matched 8 more murders that were committed. The 1988 rape and murder of 24-year-old Veronica Tina Lynn Jefferson in Arlington, and several others. He was shown to have killed a 19-year-old and her 21-year-old fiance. And then he also killed Lula Mae Farley in an alley. Following these discoveries, the Fairfax County Attorney's Office brought a number of charges against him, resulting in his extradition from San Quentin to Virginia, where he was due to stand trial. And we kind of know what happened from there. He was found guilty on all of them, and he was sentenced to death here in Virginia. And he was executed. So that is from our lovely state of Virginia. Would the DC snipers be considered serial killers? Only ones I knew that worked together. I don't know if they ever dubbed them serial killers, being that, I don't know if you caught the beginning of the show, there has to be 3 or more murders over the course of 1 month with a cool-off period. The DC snipers kind of went in and took out a bunch of people. Like, it wasn't over a time span. There was no cool-off period. I am not the #1 serial killer in Virginia. You know what, Emily, I'm trying to tell you, he's going to be my next victim. Just watched a documentary about Henry Lee Lucas and his buddy Otis Toole. They were very sadistic. Yes. Yeah. Well, Sean's still correcting me from over there. Thank you, Sean. All right. So that was Alfredo. All right. Another lesser known serial killer was Sean Vincent Gillis. He is an American serial killer and sex offender who murdered 8 women in and around Baton Rouge, Louisiana from 1994 until his arrest in 2004. In his initial arrest, he was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of ritualistic acts in the murders of 29-year-old Catherine Hall, 45-year-old Johnny Mae Williams, and 43-year-old Donna Bennett Johnston. All right. Gillis confessed to these murders with little coercion and informed investigators 5 other women were out there that he murdered too. He showed no remorse during the confession. He just said, yeah, I did it. His rap sheet started in 1980 with minor infractions, DUIs, possession of marijuana, contempt of court. But he committed his first known murder in 1994. Okay. He was born in Baton Rouge. He was raised in southern Louisiana. His father abandoned his family after his birth, and he was raised by his mother and his grandparents. As far as they know, no actual abuse took place, but that feeling of abandonment was still there. Okay. Years later, after he'd been arrested and convicted for some of his murders, a friend of one of the victims wrote to him. She turned his replies over to the prosecution, and some of Gillis's words made it to the news. In the letters, he did express remorse for the murders, particularly regretting his mutilating of the bodies, and described himself as, quote unquote, pure evil. He also said that he sometimes committed murder without knowing why he was even doing so. He first claimed he began killing because of, quote unquote, stress. He was stressed out. His first murder, which he confessed to after his arrest, was poor 82-year-old Ann Bryan. He intended to, as Sean said, grape her, but became frightened when she screamed as he touched her. So to stop her screaming, he slit her throat and stabbed her 50 times. He then left her body there at her residence. He then at that point decided that he would start stalking a woman that he had seen jogging in the South Baton Rouge area. He spent 3 weeks driving around the area looking for her. And at 5:30 a.m. on May 30th, 1999, which was a Sunday, he saw 52-year-old Hardy Schmidt jogging on Quail Run Drive. 2 days later, her body was found in a bayou in St. James Parish. He later confessed that he hit her with his car, knocked her into a ditch, got out, placed heavy-duty plastic wire wrap around her neck, and forced her into the car. He drove to a park off of Highland Road where he essayed her. After killing her, he then put her nude corpse into the trunk of his car, which at the time was a white Chevy Cavalier, and he left it there until dumping it 2 days later. He continued killing for 5 more years. The murders were completely unconnected. His presence was unknown to law enforcement at the time. They didn't even know they had a serial killer on their hands until they put 2 and 2 together. More attention was paid to a lot of the cold cases of the murdered women. When another serial killer at the time, Derek Todd Lee, was apprehended in 2003. So when certain cases could not be linked to Lee, they then at that point began to wonder if they had another serial killer. So you had Sean Vincent Gillis, Derek Todd Lee, both running around the Baton Rouge, Louisiana area, killing people. Kind of hard to track down. Lee began his killing in 1992, but between 94 and 2003, there were not only just Sean Vincent Gillis, but a whole nother serial killer that were silent and secretly targeting women. So now you've got 3 serial killers running around during the same time frame. Police are losing their minds, right? So, I mean, I don't know. I could say grope, but groping is just grabbing, and they actually essayed. Sam from Wyoming. Hello, hello. Charles Lee Ray is another one. But back to Sean Gillis, and then we'll wrap it on and go to one of my most intriguing, lesser-known serial killers. But Gillis, Donna Bennett Johnston was Gillis's 8th and final victim. He essayed her, strangled her with a nylon tie wrap, mutilated her body post-mortem, slashing her chest area, cutting off her left breast, gouging out a tattoo on her right thigh, and severing her left arm at the elbow. Pretty brutal. Okay. In the letters exchanged between Gillis and a friend of Donna's, Gillis explains her murder and even expresses his remorse, saying she was so drunk it only took about a minute and a half to succumb to unconsciousness and then death. Honestly, her last words were, "I can't breathe. I still puzzle over the postmortem dismemberment and cutting. There must be something deep in my subconscious that really needs that kind of macabre action." Tammy, the person who was writing to Gillis about her friend's murder, died in 2005. And she turned over all the letters to prosecutors, and they were used at his trial and led to his ultimate conviction. They were able to pin Donna's murder on him via tire tracks that were found near the body. They used his tires and those tire tracks and were able to make an identifying match. They then at that point obtained DNA swab of Gillis's, matched it to evidence that was found on some of the victims' bodies, and authorities arrested him in 2004. All right. Initially, he was arrested and charged for the murders of Catherine Hall, Johnny, and Donna Johnston. He stood trial for those crimes in 2008, and he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison after the jury deadlocked in the penalty phase. The previous year, he pled guilty to second-degree murder and was convicted of killing of 36-year-old Joyce, and he is still currently incarcerated at Louisiana State Pen. Okay. Kind of crazy. Chucky's mom. James Brady, me too. They usually have different MOs. They do. Every last one of them. I was going to say, not Chucky's mom, Chucky's alter ego, right? See, the hair is in the house. All right, so on to one of my most intriguing serial killers. I've done a lot of research on this said serial killer, but she is Yes, I said she. An American serial killer who murdered 12 people in Massachusetts and goes by the name of Jane Topin. She was born Honora Kelly in 1854 and nicknamed Jolly Jane. Between 1895 and 1901, she confessed to killing 31 people and is suspected of killing more than 100. The killings were carried out in Topin's capacity as a nurse. Her primary target was patients and their family members. She admitted to have committed the murders to satisfy a sexual fetish. Okay. She was quoted as saying that her ambition was to have killed more people, more helpless people, than any other man or woman who ever lived. And that is a direct quote from Jane. She was born in Boston. She was the daughter of Irish immigrants. Her mother, Bridget Kelly, died of TB when she was very young. Her father, Peter Kelly, was a well-known eccentric and abusive alcoholic. He was nicknamed by the neighborhood as Kelly the Crack, as in crackpot. In later years, Kelly was said to have sewn his own eyelids closed while working as a tailor. So clearly, Daddy had some things going on upstairs. In 1860, only a few years after his wife's death, Kelly surrendered his two youngest children, both Delia Josephine and 6-year-old Honora, to the Boston Female Asylum, which was an orphanage for indigent female children. He never saw them again. Documents from the asylum note that Delia and Honora were rescued from a very miserable home. No records exist of their experiences during their time in the asylum, but reportedly, Delia became a prostitute while their older sister, Nellie, who was not committed to the orphanage, was committed to a different insane asylum. In November of 1862, less than 2 years after being abandoned by her father, Honora was placed as an indentured servant in the home of Miss Ann Topin of Lowell, Massachusetts. Though never formally adopted by the Topins, Honora took on the surname of her benefactors to distance herself from her former family name of Kelly. Eventually, she became known as Jane Topin, and the original Topin family already had a daughter, Elizabeth, who got along pretty well with Honora. In 1885, Topin began training to be a nurse at Cambridge Hospital. Unlike her early years, where she was described as brilliant and terrible, at the hospital, she was very well liked, very bright, very friendly. That's where she earned her nickname, Jolly Jane. Once she became close with the patients, she picked her favorite ones, who were normally elderly and very sick. And during her residency, she used her patients as guinea pigs in experiments with morphine and atropine. She altered their prescription dosages to see what it would do to their nervous system. However, she spent considerable time alone with patients, making up fake charts, medicating them to drift in and out of consciousness, and even getting into bed with them. She was recommended for the prestigious Massachusetts General Hospital in 1889. There, she claimed several more victims before being fired the following year. She briefly returned to Cambridge, but was soon dismissed for administering opiates recklessly. Topin then began a career as a private nurse and flourished despite complaints of petty theft and things like that. She then began her poisoning spree in the earnest 1895 by killing her landlord first, Israel Dunham, and his wife. She also killed her foster sister Elizabeth with lethal dose of an opioid. She moved in with the elderly Alden Davis and his family to take care of him after the death of his wife, Maddie, whom Topin had murdered, mind you. And within weeks, she killed Davis, his sister Edna, and two of his daughters, Minnie and Genevieve. The surviving members of the Davis family ordered a toxicology exam on Minnie, which determined that she had been poisoned. Local authorities at this point assigned a police detail on Topin to watch her like a hawk. On October 29th, 1901, she was arrested for murder. By 1902, she had confessed to 31 murders. Soon after the trial, one of William Randolph Hearst's newspapers, the New York Journal, printed that was purported to be Topin's confession to her lawyer, claiming that she had killed more than 31 people and that she wanted the jury to find her sane so she could eventually have a chance at being released. Topin insisted upon her own sanity in court, claiming that she could not be insane if she knew what she was doing all along, and she knew it was wrong the entire time. But nonetheless, she was declared insane and committed. On June 23rd of 1902, the Barnstable County Courthouse, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed for life into the Taunton Insane Asylum Hospital, and she died there August 17th, 1938 at the age of 81. There is a list. If you look them up, I won't go there. But there is a list of her victims. Like I said, most of them were elderly. The youngest one was 40. And that was Minnie. Shortly after the arrest, the Hoosier State Chronicles reported that Topin would fondle her victims as they died and attempt to see like the inner workings of their souls through their eyes. Under questioning, she stated she derived a deep sexual thrill from patients being right near death, coming back to life, and then dying again. She administered a drug mixture to the patients she chose as her victims. She would then lay with them, hold them, caress them, and she was dubbed the Angel of Mercy, which is a type of serial killer who takes on a caretaker role, attacks the vulnerable and their dependents. Though she also murdered for seemingly more personal reasons, such as in the case of like the Davis family, it is possible that it was also motivated by jealousy. In the case of murder of her foster sister, she later described her motive as paralysis of thought, a strong urge to poison. She used poison for more than just murder, though. She reportedly poisoned a housekeeper just enough so that she would appear drunk in order to steal her job and then kill the family. She even poisoned herself just to see what it would do to evoke the sympathy of men who courted her. So, in a nutshell, no, Ma, I don't wear contacts. In a nutshell, Jane Topin, the reason I have always had kind of an interest in her was her reasoning behind it. Yes, she was abandoned. Yes, she had an alcoholic father, but it seemed like a good family took her in and tried to give her and show her, a better quality of life. When I started digging a little bit deeper to find out that she was like I can't talk. A servant for the family. At that point, it raised the question, was there abuse during her time with the Topin family? I don't know. But she is considered actually the first female serial killer in the U.S. Okay. There are 28 serial killers who were never caught. And I'll just kind of scroll through those. You've got Charlie Chopoff. He was killing people between 1972 and 1974. He attacked and killed 5 Black children, and then no one was ever sentenced. But there was one suspect, Erno Soto. He confessed to one of the murders, but he was considered unfit to stand trial and committed to a psychiatric hospital, where he later identified Charlie Chopoff, but they thought he was insane. I know Sean said the Zodiac killer was caught, but he is still on the list of someone who hasn't been caught. So unless, it's since this list was written, which was July of last year, I'm not sure. But the Moonlight Murderer is another one. In 1946, 8 people were attacked by an unknown killer that was sometimes dubbed the Phantom Killer in the town of Texarkana. They lived in absolute terror for months. Couples were brutally attacked. Throughout the history of the case, almost 400 people were arrested on suspicion, but none were ever convicted. The Atlanta Ripper. In 1911, around 20 Black women were brutally murdered by an unknown killer. Although several suspects were arrested, no one again has ever been charged with these crimes. Of course, the most infamous Jack the Ripper. In 1888, 5 sex workers in London were murdered by an unknown serial killer. It is widely believed that he was a doctor or a butcher due to the precision of the mutilations. The Axeman of New Orleans, he was an active serial killer from 1917 to 1919. He brutally attacked 12 men and women with an axe. The Axeman would famously send letters into the newspapers. That's what makes him stand out a little bit. He would send anonymous letters in claiming that he would spare any house that played loud jazz music. So you can imagine what New Orleans sounded like at that time. Everybody in every parish started playing the loudest jazz music that they could find around the clock. The babysitter, also known as the Oakland County child killer, he murdered at least 4 children in the 70s. 2 boys and 2 girls were kidnapped. Their bodies were left throughout Oakland County, Michigan. The Cleveland torso murderer killed 12 people, left their bodies dismembered throughout Ohio. The crimes took place throughout the 30s. Many of the victims were so badly cut up that they never even were identified. The Servant Girl Annihilator. In 1884 and between 1884 and 1885, several women were murdered in Austin, Texas by a killer who attacked victims in their bed while they slept. The killer would attack women in their beds, then drag them away and kill them outside. The murders mysteriously ended when extra police were hired for this investigation. Guess he got scared, right? Hey, LT. So, Ronnie, I'm going to get to that because I consider Manson a serial killer. Sean and I had a debate on this because Manson never actually killed anybody. So, I don't know. Michelle Wilfong with the Haunted Apartment. Hi. So, apparently from July to now, Gary Francis was identified as the Zodiac Killer. That's interesting. I need to stay up to date on my serial killer news. The Black Dahlia was never caught, if I'm not mistaken. You are correct. I don't know who's acting out, Ma. Zuko was whining at the door. See, now that's Sean's opinion. Manson was just a mastermind. I mean, I can't disagree. Anybody that has that much power to manipulate a group of people or several people into committing crimes for himself, I mean, that's pretty impressive. Brian Elder said Manson did kill 1 man before he formed his quote-unquote family. That doesn't make him a serial killer, though. Remember, guys, you got to kill 3 within 1 month and have a cool-down period. Oh, Lord, Zuko was trying to get Gran. Oh, my goodness. All right. So, this was a funny one. I had to read this and kind of laugh. There is a serial killer out there called the Doodler. I thought that was funny because everything that's going on with like the Doodler. All right. The Doodler is likely responsible for the murder of 14 gay men in San Francisco. The murders occurred between 74 and 75. The killer would then meet his victims in nightclubs and other gay hotspots. A few of the victims, though, survived, but they have since left the state, and the Doodler still remains doodling around. All right. Bible John. 3 women were murdered in Scotland. The investigation pointed towards convicted serial killer Peter Tobin, who also killed women in the same area, but he was never tried for the crimes, and Bible John is still on the loose. The Freeway Phantom. Okay. A lot of people here in Virginia might have heard about, the Freeway Phantom. 6 young Black women were kidnapped, essayed, and strangled to death in 71 and 72 in the DC area, some of which trickled down to Northern Virginia. The victims were from 10 to 18 years old. They did suspect a gentleman by the name of Robert Askins, but they never charged him. He actually died in prison where he was incarcerated for an unrelated crime, but he always denied his role in the killings. They still, to this day, do not know who it is. And this person is identified as the Freeway Phantom. Similar situation with the I-70 killer. In the 90s, a serial killer left the bodies of his victims near I-70 highway spanning over multiple states. No suspect was ever discovered. The case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries. Still to this day, they just know they're looking for a white male, ages 22 to 32 years old, slender, about 5'7" to 5'9". They have some sketches, but all 4 sketches that they have are 4 different people. Frankfurt Slasher. All right. 85 to 1990, 8 people were SA'd and stabbed to death in Frankfurt, PA. One suspect, Leonard Christopher, was connected to one of the murders and convicted, but police could never connect him to any of the other 7 people. The Connecticut River Valley Killer is still on the loose. At least 7 women were stabbed to death in New Hampshire and Vermont. Now, while on his deathbed, Gary Westover confessed to the murder of one woman who was suspected to be a victim of the Connecticut River Valley Killer, but he didn't confess to any of the others. Still on the loose. Marie Delphine LaLaurie, a very respected socialite in Louisiana in the early 1800s, but little did her admirers know she was a torturer. In 1834, a fire was set in her home by one of her slaves who was afraid of being tortured and killed. The fire at that point led officials to see what she was doing. She fled New Orleans from an angry mob and was never caught. Dean Corll, aka the Candyman. He murdered and SA'd at least 28 young boys in the early 70s. His family owned a candy factory in Texas, which is how he got his nickname, the Candyman. He was killed by an accomplice before he could be caught. So he was actually never charged. You've also got the Stone Man. He was in 1989, he killed at least 13 people. Most of the victims were homeless beggars and were bludgeoned to death. The Honolulu Strangler. This one I found kind of comical, guys. So in London in the early 60s, at least 6 sex workers were murdered. Their naked bodies were dumped in a river or around London. And since the killer's methods mimicked Jack the Ripper, he was actually nicknamed Jack the Stripper. I thought that was funny. Jack the Stripper. Yes, he was a cult leader. Do you remember Juan Carnola? I do not. That is not one I'm versed on. Yes, Ronnie, they did come forward and say that they thought the I-70 freeway killer was a truck driver, but they never identified him yet. Okay, James. So Gary Francis was a suspect as a Zodiac, but he wasn't convicted. All right. The Beer Man. I know somebody called the Beer Man, Ronnie Anderson. In Mumbai, India, several people were killed by the same unknown suspect. A beer bottle was found next to some of the victims, leading to the nickname Beer Man. One man was charged with the murders, but he was acquitted by a higher court. He has since opened up a food stand in Mumbai and is trying to sell his story to a film production company. The Rainbow Maniac. That's one of the most recent ones. In 2007, 2008, as many as 16 gay men were murdered in Brazil. The victims were shot in the head, and a suspect, Jaro Francisco Franco, was suspected of one of the murders, but they couldn't connect him to any of the other ones. You've got the Monster of Florence. 16 victims were killed. Nobody was ever identified in Florence, Italy. Still don't know who it is. You guys may have heard of the Alphabet Murderer. 3 victims were SA'd and strangled to death in towns surrounding Rochester, New York by the same killer in the 70s. He was dubbed the Alphabet Murderer because the victims' initials matched the town where they were discovered. Similar murders happened in California, but definitive proof that it was the same killer has never been linked, okay? Nor has the Alphabet Killer been found or identified. The Long Island Serial Killer. 11 people, primarily women, murdered by the same killer. He had been working for about 2 decades, leaving his victims' bodies on Gilgo Beach in Long Island. New evidence continues to emerge that will hopefully help authorities catch the killer. So that one we've got, fingers crossed, they keep getting new evidence to this day. Highway of Tears murders. Over the past 30 years, thousands of Indigenous women in British Columbia have gone missing. Dozens of these women have disappeared near Highway 16, a road in the middle of Canada's wilderness that has been sadly dubbed the Highway of Tears. They have a suspect, Bobby Jack Fowler, but he has since died, and there is no concrete evidence pointing to his guilt. The last one, guys, is the Colonial Parkway killer. 4 couples were murdered in the 80s by a killer who found his victims along the scenic Colonial Parkway here in Virginia. Former law enforcement officer Fred Atwell has been linked to these crimes and has pled guilty to other felony offenses. However, his connection to the murders has not been definitively proven. So, those are a list of serial killers who were never caught. And I'm leaving you with, I'm going to have to look, Juan Corona. I'll have to look him up. So there, before I wrap this up, guys, we walk by, I think Ronnie said it, at least 30 serial killers in our lifetime, I think is what the statistic reads. So it kind of makes you look at the person when you walk by. Why are you coming in here, Sean? Why? Go sit down. Do you have something to say? You want me to send you an invite? I can't hear him, nor is he typing fast enough. But it makes you look at the person that you cross paths with. Are you a serial killer? Did you kill somebody? 90% of serial killers blend in with the community really well. The crazy thing is I thought about this prior to coming on this podcast. How the heck is true crime or serial killers linked to the paranormal? Because as you guys are fully aware, this is a paranormal podcast. This is not a true crime podcast. There's a dozen of those out there. I follow one in particular on Spotify that holds my attention because it is more current and things like that. Why are you in here? I didn't do this on Eileen Wuornos. I said you got a piece of her history. I told everybody that you got a piece of her history. Do you see this? I'm being interrupted as I'm trying to wrap it up. You're getting on the camera with your bandage on your face. Bye. Go rest. Guys, he wanted me to bring up Eileen Wuornos. Okay. So, for those that don't know who Eileen Wuornos is, excuse me, she was an American serial killer between 89 and 90 while she was involved in prostitution along the highways in Florida. She shot dead and robbed 7 of her male clients. She claimed that her victims had either SA'd or attempted to SA her, and the homicides were committed in self-defense. She was sentenced to death for 6 of the murders and executed in 2002 after spending more than 10 years on Florida's death row. Okay. And let me show you guys. Sean wanted me to show you. Stop. Oh, there's Sean's big hand. Okay. This right here is Miss Eileen Wuornos. I don't know if you guys can see this very well, but in the middle, this is a shadow box I put together for Sean. I know I'm crafty, right? Let me Vanna White it for you guys. Oh, you can't see the bottom where I'm Vanna Whiting it. Okay. But this is what she looks like. This is her mugshot. As you guys can see, she was smiling in court. She actually, I believe, yes, Leah, she was evil. I believe she even said, "Don't let me out of here. If you let me out of here, I am going to kill again." She was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And among other things, her serial killer, I guess, tendencies started at age 11. She began engaging in sexual activity at school in exchange for cigarettes, drugs, and food. She also engaged with her own brother. She said that her grandfather had SA'd and beaten her when she was a child. Um, and at age 14, she became pregnant after being SA'd by a family friend. She gave birth to a boy at a home for unwed mothers. The child was placed for adoption. I don't believe she ever saw that child again. She was thrown out at age 15. But if you want a good movie to watch that depicts Eileen Wuornos, 10 out of 10, highly recommend Monster. Okay. Kim, love it. Love the topic serial killers also. I have to go back and watch the whole podcast. Oh, thanks, Kim. Yep, Brian, he showed up. Just his hand showed up, though. But yes, Leah, she was pure evil. In the movie, there's actually a scene that kind of, yanked it at my heartstrings. She had one John that picked her up, and in the movie, she actually let him live due to a disability. So I'm gonna leave it at that. If you've watched it, you'll know. Emily said she just watched a Monster the other night. I don't know how many people exactly she let go, but she was sentenced to death and killed in 2002. So, yeah, that letter you saw is a letter between her and her childhood friend, Dawn. And I will read just the first paragraph to you guys, and then we'll wrap this up. But it says here, Dear Dawn, it's too cold and wet. It's raining outside, so I had a couple of cigs and flew back in. Once I took my wet stuff off, plus shoes, there was wet dirt and sand everywhere in my room. Must have took 20 minutes just to clean. Jeez. Forget that mess next time. And then it goes on and on from there. I'm still chilled to the bone. It's yucky out there. I love rainy days, but inside watching the nature flow. Anyway, here I am back inside, starting a new kite to catch up. For those that don't know, a kite is a letter. Okay. Are you ready? Hold on. You know how crazy I am. And then she goes on to say, Miss Alexander, Alexander. He does call a lot, doesn't he? Please keep my private life private and limited, etc., etc., etc. So, but as I was saying, yes, there's also a documentary about her that was really good too and shed a lot of light on her childhood and crimes. Yes. Wonder how many of these killers were possessed. That is a really good question. That's kind of where I was going when I was wrapping it up, guys. There has been reports of paranormal activity, specifically at the farm. And for those that are versed in serial killers, that is directly related to Ed Gein. There has been multiple paranormal researchers that have gone into the farm and have reportedly made contact with Ed Gein. So my question for you guys to kind of sit on until next week is, do you feel like serial killers that are executed or die before being executed, die in prison, or anything like that, come back to their original location, whether it be their home, their hideout, whatever, and haunt that location? That is my question. Ronnie said possession is rare, crazy is everywhere. I tend to lean more towards that, Carrie, only because, but I mean, it is a good question. Look at the cabin on the 360. Gentleman wasn't considered a serial killer, but he said that there was something that made him commit this heinous act. So I don't know. I have yet to read an article, and I've read a bunch on serial killers that are claiming the voices made me do it, things like that. There was a murder that happened when I lived in Arizona. A woman drowned her 3 children. And what she did is she drowned them in the bathtub, pulled them out, got them fully clothed, and then called the police on herself. And when the police arrived, she said that there were voices that made her do it, that the devil told her to do it because her children were evil. So, I mean, I think serial killers are a little bit more articulate in what they do. Most of them are they commit these crimes with precision, thought, they're premeditated, things like that. They're not just hack and slash. So, yeah. But definitely think that serial killers can come back to their origin of location as a haunt, as a ghost. Sean said he does believe demons get in these folks' head. So I know that was a lot of information, fun facts. If there's a topic you want us to cover next week, actually, I believe next week we may have a guest. Let me look. Dun, 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 dun. I think we have a possible guest next. No, we do not. I'm sorry. I'm wrong. But Sean will be back with us next week, guys. If there's a specific topic that you want us to cover, at this point, we'll cover anything you guys want us to talk about. Again, thank you all for the prayers and well wishes for my lovely co-host that decided to flag y'all down in the camera. Sean said the devil himself, even the Bible said, what they're here to do, steal, kill, and destroy. As long as my face doesn't look deranged. It's not going to look deranged, honey. Ronnie said demons don't get in their heads. They are demons. I'm going to lean towards Ronnie on this one. Definite pure evil. Anybody that could sit down and articulate and come up with a master plan such as this definitely is something that is pure evil. So, with that being said, guys, jump on over to the Freaking Awesome Paranormal Show with Ryan Jones and his lovely co-host, Rhonda Harris, right on the Rift Nation Network. And we'll see you guys back next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, I'll see you on the other side.